and welcome and happy start to the week. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening, no one cares. That show where every episode's the last episode. A lot to cover today. In case you've been living under a rock, President Joe Biden has stepped down from running for president again. Tony Five, our foreign correspondent, and I are going to cover that much later in the show. Oh, and a quick announcement. I'm going to be out Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Summer holidays. I'm visiting Canada. What are you going to do about it? I'll be here tomorrow and then back on Monday, January the 29th. Okay, today's show, a fantastic lineup. First, we'll have tech expert Carmi Levy for a little segment we call It's Time for Technology Time. The title redundant, the content stimulating. We'll talk about the CrowdStrike outage that caused so many businesses, so many airlines to shut down for days at a time. And also, we'll reveal the latest state in a series of U.S. states to have the website Pornhub blocked on them because, as Pornhub says, they're advocating for privacy rights. After that, foreign correspondent Tony Five to talk about Biden dropping out from the election and the worst smells you've ever smelled. We'll talk about something called fish odor syndrome or trimethylaminuria. And no, I have no idea how to pronounce that word. This is a genetic disorder that causes somebody to smell like stanky fish. It's hilarious, but also very sad. And I do know someone who's afflicted by this, so I'm looking forward to discussing that with Tony Five. Afterward, it's super synchronizers. Those are people who synchronize with others. Think your heartbeat, the way you move, the way you blink your eyes. Turns out people who do this subconsciously, according to a study from psychologists, are sexy and considered to be more attractive by potential partners. We'll talk to a psychologist who's done that study. And finally, it's NASCAR. Quite frankly, I'm not too crazy about NASCAR or car racing, but I'm going to talk to somebody who is and do a little segment called 10 Questions About NASCAR from an Idiot Who Knows Nothing About It. In this case, I'm the idiot. That is the show. That is the lineup. I am looking forward to doing it. So let's jump in. But first, this. In Florida news, we have police who are practically begging people to stop taking selfies with a depressed bear. The bear has been found sulking on the side of Highway 98 in Santa Rosa Beach. Yes, the bear, allegedly channeling its inner emo teenager, just wants to be left alone. And can't you relate? In some sense, don't we all just want to be left alone? The county sheriff's office took to social media to say, hey, this bear is clearly not in the mood for pictures. And honestly, I can't blame the bear. We all have those days where we don't want to be somebody's social media content, right? I don't want to be on your TikTok. I don't want to be on your Instagram. Police described the poor bear as stressed, depressed, and lemon zest. Yes, that's what the police wrote, and I have no idea why they wrote it. But I do know it sounds like a terrible cocktail. Rangers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, or FWC for short, were called in after crowds gathered to snap pics. By the time the Rangers got there, the bear had decided that enough was enough and headed back into the woods. Perhaps he just needed a breather from all the human nonsense. The FWC said the bear looked fine, probably just overheated. And in Florida, the summer is no picnic. This was a surprise to me. Bears are common in Florida, especially when they're young and figuring out their lives. Now, the moral of this story, the advice, give bears space. Don't approach them, and for the love of God, do not feed them. The website bearwise.org has all the tips you need, like, quote, don't crowd a bear unless you're looking to be a snack. All in all, there are about 4,050 black bears roaming the state of Florida. And last month, the state's governor signed a bill allowing people to shoot bears if they pose a threat. Great. The Republican governor said the bill was inspired by tales of bears high on drugs tearing houses apart. And no, there are no known documented cases of bears on drugs in Florida, but hey, the state never fails to disappoint with its headlines. So if you see a bear, even a mopey, depressed one, let it be. We've all had those days when the last thing we want is to be somebody else's selfie. This next story seems a little fishy. Celebrities have reported on the latest beauty trend. Salmon sperm facials. Yes, you've heard that right. They're injecting fish reproductive goo into their faces. And no, this isn't some plot from a bizarre, weird, dystopian sci-fi movie. It's real life. Fish sperm in the face. Celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Jennifer Aniston have admitted to trying this new protocol. Now, I've heard of some crazy beauty treatments, but this one really takes the caviar. Apparently, there's an antioxidant called spermine in the sperm of both humans and fish that's supposed to be great for your skin. Great. Let me grab a dirty mag and a needle. I'll be back in 15 minutes with glowing skin. So let me break this down. It's not just salmon sperm. So let me break this down for you. It's not just salmon sperm, but it's something called salmon PDRN, which is extracted from the sperm cells of our orange fish friends. Or are they pink fishy friends? Or are they just salmon colored? That's why that color is called salmon. But here's why this isn't so bad for the fish. You can actually harvest this stuff without harming the fish at all. They call it abdominal massaging, which sounds highly erotic because squeezing the life out of a fish should be a very sensual experience. The romantic goo of the fish then gets injected into the face via microneedling. It's like getting a facial and filler all in one. Because who wouldn't want to look like they've been slapped with a fish stick? I said stick, not the other word. Studies claim that it can help with wound healing and reduce inflammation. And beauty parlors in South Korea have been doing this for years. Leave it to the Koreans to be light years ahead, both in skincare and K-pop. According to some research, the DNA in salmon sperm increases skin elasticity and collagen levels. So it's like giving your face a fishy facelift. One study even suggests that manufacturers should use this stuff in sunscreen and moisturizers. I can just imagine it now, my mother saying, "Honey, don't forget your sunscreen. And by the way, it's made of fish sperm." One aesthetics doctor who was interviewed about this story says the treatment is biocompatible, which is a fancy word for saying your skin loves it. They're saying it's the new miracle goo. Good for almost anyone, but before you rush to your local fishmonger, let's remember what PETA has to say. Keep the salmon in the sea. Because according to them, fish have feelings too, and they do not want to be part of your beauty routine. Oh, and here's a fun one to end on. Salmon sperm isn't just for the face, it's being used to rejuvenate the vagina and also to create eco-friendly plastics. So the next time you're enjoying a sushi dinner, just remember, you can put it in a needle, inject it into your face, and maybe, I don't know, save the planet or something. Here's a heartwarming one about somebody finally getting the recognition they deserve, even if it was 3/4 of a century later. Allow me to introduce you to Rosemary Fowler. She's a 98 years young physicist who's finally getting her due 75 years after she discovered the kaon particle. That's a subatomic particle in physics, and I don't really understand what it is, but she's getting an honorary doctorate from the University of Bristol. At this rate, I may expect my honorary doctorate in sarcasm from Bristol sometime in, well, I haven't really accomplished anything. But let me tell you the story. Let's rewind the clock back to 1948 under the mentorship of a certain unnamed professor. Because he's not important to the story, Rosemary discovers this kaon particle, which not only shook up the world of particle physics, but also helped that unnamed professor bag a Nobel Prize. She gets nothing for her discovery, and a professor gets rewarded. Talk about being overshadowed. Now, not long after, Rosemary chooses to leave her PhD to marry her husband and raise 3 kids. Now, remember, she's in post-war Britain, a time when food was rationed, and so were PhDs for women, apparently. She says her decision was pragmatic, but let's face it, managing 3 kids is a lot like trying to predict particle behavior. Chaotic and full of surprises. And here's what's wild about this story. Rosemary hasn't done anything since to, quote, deserve special respect, she says. Now there's a whole lot of humility. Back to her honorary doctorate from the University of Bristol, the chancellor of that school praised her intellectual rigor, curiosity, and the fact that she probably had more patience than anybody in particle physics. Seriously, discovering the kaon particle was an impressive feat. And by impressive, I mean I read it. I don't understand any of this stuff. Now, speaking of the kaon particle, when she first spotted it, she said she knew it was big. Imagine seeing something that no one else has seen before. For me, that'd be an audience laughing at my jokes. For her, a particle that led to a revolution in physics. Rosemary's discovery was so ahead of its time, it helped predict the Higgs boson, which was discovered decades later. That's the particle everyone calls the God particle. So I guess it's probably important too. It couldn't have been discovered without her. So in a way, she left breadcrumbs for future physicists and then got zero credit for it. Until now, 75 years later, honorary doctorate. So in case you think it's too late to achieve your dreams, remember Rosemary Fowler. It's never too late. Whether you're getting an honorary degree or finally figuring out how to set up your television properly, dreams have no expiration date. So here's to Rosemary, a pioneer, a physicist, and proof that sometimes good things come to those who wait. 75 years. In just a few minutes' time, with the CrowdStrike outage that caused so many businesses and so many airlines to shut down operations, stranding passengers and whatnot, there's a lot to talk about. So we'll do just that with Carmi Levy in a moment. It's time for technology time, the time of the week where we make time to go over stories from the industry of tech. We are here with expert Carmi Levy. Carmi, welcome, my friend.
Hello, David. Great to be with you. Definitely my favorite time of the week. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. My bad.
I've said it once. I'll say it again. I'll make the jokes around here, Carmi. Where I want to go with this is as follows. CrowdStrike, a company that I think a lot of people had not heard of if they didn't work for a large corporation that had lots of Windows computers, until a few days ago, made a slight error in judgment and took down everyone's computer. Airlines, large corporations. It was wild. I guess my first question for you is for those who don't know what CrowdStrike is. What is it, and how did like a piece of software that no one had heard about take down like billions of dollars of industry?
So this is CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity company, and they're a giant. Before all of this started, they were worth about $84 billion. They've grown largely through acquisition in recent years. They are one of the dominant cybersecurity companies on planet Earth, based in Austin, Texas. And they sell cybersecurity solutions to companies like Microsoft. And then what that does is it protects computers from cyber attack. And so they don't really sell to consumers. They really sell, and one of the reasons why the impact was so widespread, they don't sell to you and me. It's not like you're going to install it on your laptop, but they do sell to, say, a hospital that has a data center, that has web services, that runs a website, an organization, maybe an airline that has reservation through an app. Or an online web service. And so it protects those machines from the constantly evolving threat landscape. Cyber criminals come up with a new way to attack us. So CrowdStrike will update its software known as Falcon, and they will send out an update in much the same way that we get updates on our phones all the time. You get the update, you reboot, you're good to go. Unfortunately, an update just before Friday, early Friday, was not well done. They didn't test it as well as they probably should have, and there was a flaw within the code. And so it was just that flaw got out into the wild. It was distributed, and when it hit the target Windows machines, it caused them to blow up, crash hard, right out to the blue screen of death. And they kept trying to reboot themselves, and they just couldn't. So they were in this endless cycle. Any services that required these machines obviously went dark. So if you were at an airport trying to get on a plane, you weren't getting on that plane because American Airlines, United, Delta, they all canceled their flights, and lots of airlines around the world and airports did the same thing. If you were standing in the middle of Times Square, most of the advertising boards also using Windows servers went down as well. If you were a patient in a hospital somewhere in the world, there was a good chance that your surgery or procedure might have been delayed because their systems went dark. So the impact was massive. And even though they estimate about 8.5 million machines were affected by this. So it doesn't sound like a lot. It's a small percentage of the total number of Windows machines in the world. But these weren't just individual people's laptops and desktops. These were servers, each of which was servicing thousands, if not millions of people. So you think of the impact. It was global. It was huge, probably the biggest IT outage that I've seen in my career. And I know I'm not the only one who's made similar observations.
So it's the blue screen of death that they would see, which for anyone who remembers computers, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you did something wrong or there was some bug that happened on a Windows machine, you'd get this horrible blue screen that says you got to restart the machine. I guess the problem was these machines were in an infinite loop. They'd restart, blue screen. screen. They'd restart blue screen. I read something from a whistleblower. I'm not sure how reliable it is, kind of rumblings that CrowdStrike's control for how they go from software update to software update being pushed to 8 million business critical computers. There wasn't a lot of like steps blocking any old software engineer at CrowdStrike from just sending out code. Like they didn't have the necessary controls to get those updates out and get those updates out in a secure and stable way. Well, maybe secure, but stable was what this whistleblower said.
Oh, yeah. I've seen those reports as well. And I think, I've led application support development teams that did exactly that, pushed out updates. You're a software developer, so you've done this work too. We've been in the middle of this world, and it's pretty clear that their push to production processes, their ability to thoroughly test something in a test environment, new updated code in that test environment or sandbox before it gets out or pushed out, distributed to the real world, was clearly inadequate. The checks and balances simply didn't work. And it's one of those things that you can skimp out on those steps, and most of the time you get away with it. And some of the language that we saw from CrowdStrike was that, we're always releasing the latest updates, and it's a very intense environment, and we have to release them quickly to counter the latest threats from the threat landscape. And so they're using language that almost tries to give them an out. It makes excuses for why they were moving so quickly and not doing the due diligence that they should have. But from an IT perspective, internally, I would say on investigation, we will realize that not all was as it should have been inside that company, and changes need to be made.
And the CEO of that company has a bit of a pattern of history, a history of pattern. What's the phrase I'm looking for? A pattern of history? My brain isn't working right now.
He's got quite the history, and I think it's notable to bring it up now. I'm certainly not into dredging up people's pasts, but this one, in this case, it's relevant. George Kurtz, he's the CEO of CrowdStrike, and he's been kind of the face of the company since this thing exploded, really communicating everything, apologizing and saying what the company is going to be doing. In 2010, McAfee, a security company that was dominant at that time, had a significant global meltdown as well. And wouldn't you know it, the chief technology officer of that company at that time was none other than George Kurtz. So he has a history of, and again, I'm not assigning blame, I'm not pointing my finger at him, but there's a history here. He was at another company that had a significant global outage, and here we are 14 years later, there he is again. So did he learn the lessons from the last time? I'm not entirely sure. But I think, it certainly bears discussing. And quite frankly, I think the entire industry, not just this one company, really needs to be looking at their own internal processes and asking themselves, are we doing enough to ensure that we're not the next McAfee or the next CrowdStrike? Because rest assured, if they're thinning out their internal processes, they may very well be next week's headline or next month's headline.
So let's go back into the outage. What happened for me, the most interesting thing is air travel. And it's really a stark reminder of how vulnerable these large corporations are to any sorts of problems with their computers. Like if their computers go down, their business is worthless. And I guess that stands to reason. But when you think of airlines, you don't think of like, okay, they can no longer take any kinds of bookings if like some of their computers go down, and flights will all be grounded, and you can't go to Florida to Disneyland with your children if their computers are down. So my question is, what was the impact with airlines across the US, across Canada, across the world from this?
The impact was massive. I mean, in the U.S., I'm a bit of an av geek, so I follow if I hear a plane flying over, I'll pull up the Flight Radar app on my phone just to see what it is. I'm that curious, and so I was watching aviation traffic in the U.S. as the outage kind of moved forward through the day, and you could see the total amount of traffic, the volume, those little yellow airplanes. It got less and less as the hours went on, as companies like United and Delta called in ground stops, national ground stops, not allowing planes to take off. And if there were any planes already in the air, they had to land and stay where they were. They could not turn them around. So the impact was massive, but it wasn't all airlines. For example, north of the border in Canada, WestJet was completely sort of down for the count. and they canceled a significant chunk of their flights as well. And but other airlines, for example, Air Canada, not affected to any significant degree. And I think it illustrates that the companies, and both airlines as well as any other sector, that had a diversity of technology in their infrastructure, in other words, weren't exclusively relying on Windows to run their servers. They had options available to them. So if the services weren't running on Windows, well, then maybe the machines that were connected to devices in data centers that were running Linux or Mac operating systems were in fact still available. So I think there's a lesson to IT professionals everywhere: is look at the technology that you have out there. If you put everything in one basket and that one basket becomes unavailable, there's an outage, you've got a problem. And so I think there's a bit of a reckoning in the industry now. We need to have more diversity of technology because, interestingly, that CrowdStrike update rolled out to other server types as well, Macs as well as Linux machines. And wouldn't you know it, those machines were unaffected. They did not crash, only the Windows ones. So if you were kind of dumb enough to only have Windows, you got hit this time. But this isn't an advertisement to everyone switch over to Linux because it's open source and it's cool, but because Linux could be the next target. But you have different technologies so that you can fall back onto, switch over to an alternate technology if option A is not available. That redundancy is key to keeping the lights on when there is an outage, or not this time, but maybe next time, a cyber attack.
When we come back, we'll talk a website that is both mine and Carmi's favorite, Pornhub. Sorry, I misread that. We'll talk a website that is not mine and Carmi's favorite website, Pornhub, because they're pulling out of the United States, state by state, because of, well, we'll talk about it in a minute, certain laws that prevent freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of pornography, all that and more on, what's the name of this segment again?
Time for technology time.
We are here discussing a website that is not Carmi's favorite. I have to issue a correction there. Pornhub.
Because my wife's looking at me.
You know, it's fun to talk porn websites, but the underlying reason why Pornhub is pulling out of states like Nebraska is kind of worrisome. You know, it borders on censorship and it's coming from various statewide bills. And if the Republicans come into power federally, who knows what they'll do nationwide. But what is going on? Why are websites like Pornhub pulling out of states like Nebraska?
Well, first of all, I think you just wanted to say pulling out in relation to Pornhub. So you got your laugh. Good. There you go.
I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Oh, sure. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But no, in all seriousness. So Nebraska is the latest state in the U.S. to enact laws that require companies that serve as porn hubs, porn platforms that distribute this content to include age verification, so that you have to confirm that you're 18 years old before you are allowed into the website. And they're also required by that law. In Nebraska, it's called Legislative Bill 1092, but they're also required to collect information. You have to register in order to view, and with a government issued identification. And Nebraska is not the only state. They're just the latest of about a dozen and a half states in the U.S. that have done exactly the same thing. And in just about every case, Pornhub has led the charge, essentially saying that no, this is government overreach. That yes, we want there to be, we certainly don't want young users to have inadvertent or deliberate access to pornography. They certainly need to be protected. They're not agreeing with that. What they are disagreeing with is the way in which that verification or age verification is enacted. They say it allows governments to collect huge amounts of private data on their citizens, and it essentially amounts to government overreach and censorship. And they are playing, it's ironic that the porn industry is trying to play good guy here, but that's exactly what they're saying, is they're standing up to government overreach. And in many cases, courts, appeals courts and Supreme Courts are agreeing with them, striking down some of these attempts by U.S. states to impose this kind of age verification with collection of private data. So it's an interesting battle between states that want to protect kids and pornography companies that say they want to protect kids, but now say they want to protect kids and everyone else from the government. In very interesting battle, and quite frankly, fascinating. It continues to intensify.
I think there's nothing wrong with adults consuming pornography. However, I think there are issues with the industry. I think children can too easily access it. I think there are performers who have been coerced or have been sex trafficked. It's not an industry that doesn't have its problems. It certainly does. But I don't think citizens having to give an ID card or personal documents to access it is the answer. It gives the government a lot of information about your most private and intimate moments. Maybe the government could use it to blackmail you. Who knows? I'm not saying the government will act badly, but when given the opportunity, the United States government often does act badly. So that's probably my biggest concern. I'm with them on it. I get that they're trying to prevent children accessing it. But can't that be done on the device level? Can't that be done on like child locks on the phone instead of parents giving an ID card so that they can access it and not their children? It does seem like an overreach. And yeah, I don't agree with it. And I'm on Pornhub's side, I gotta say.
I'm 100% with you on that. There always seems to be almost like it almost feels like a political solution to this, that politicians who don't really understand the subtle nuances of protecting younger users from extreme content online come up with the most populist, easy to digest solution that really doesn't address the solution at all, but it gives them a political checkmark to tell their constituents, look, this is what I did to protect you. When in fact it doesn't, and it opens up a whole other can of worms in terms of privacy and confidentiality and censorship. So I think this is one of those cases. I view this in the same bucket as the attempted ban of TikTok in the US, where they're trying to force the company to sell itself to an American interest, and which of course also opens the door to government access to private data that flows over that particular platform. So yet again, you have governments not really understanding the fundamentals of how this technology works, and trying to implement a political solution that ultimately does little to protect those they say they're trying to protect, but exposes entire other populations to even greater levels of risk when it comes to personal data. So yeah, we have to have a more fulsome discussion, but apparently in at least 17 or 18 states in the US, including Nebraska, the populists seem to be winning this battle, and it's leaving us more exposed, not less.
If Republicans really want to win, don't take away people's pornography. You know what I'm saying? Like they can go out and say it's wrong. We're the party of family values. Like, sure, pay lip service to it, but where it really counts, like, don't take away people's rights. Aren't they supposed to be the party of small government, of not government overreach, and they want ID cards to look at a website? Like, it's wild.
But there's also a very strong evangelical thread through this political movement. And so just the mere mention of the word pornography, of course, gets everyone scurrying. And so I think we need to separate the fact that this is a porn site that's taking this stand. It could be any site that would be taking this stand because it's a porn site. I think it's clouding the issue. But the reality is, what happens if they start using similar age verification on, I don't know, maybe a movie site because they think the movie rating isn't to their liking? Once you've opened that Pandora's box, there's no stopping laws like this to verify online use to being applied to any other type of online resource, pornographic or not. That's the scary thing. And this really is the thin edge of the wedge. And if you allow laws like this to persist, then essentially it's open season on any other kind of online content. And that, frankly, should chill all of us.
My view on if you don't like pornography is sort of like my view on if you don't like same-sex marriage. If you don't like pornography, don't watch it. If you don't like same-sex marriage, don't have one. Like that's my don't try to stop other people.
Precisely. And if you're a parent who is worried about your child accessing pornographic content prematurely, and every parent should be, this is not something we should be looking to the government to protect us from. This is something that we as parents should be having conversations with each other, with our peers, and with our kids about the risks of objectionable content online, including and beyond pornographic content, and it starts at home. And we keep thinking that the government's going to save us from ourselves, but we all know full well kids are really smart. They already know how to get around these verifications. My kids would have had a VPN on every device in about 8 minutes if such a law had been enacted where we live. So it's just not going to happen. And in the end, it isn't going to change the situation on the ground, but it will give parents a false sense of security, and it will give politicians just a really lousy excuse to tell their constituents, look at me, I did something, even if that something was really a whole lot of nothing.
Look, I looked at this stuff way too young, but when I was looking at it, you would like the image would start loading, and then you'd get the model's face, and then you'd have to make the decision whether you wanted to keep on loading, and then you'd get the upper body, and then you'd take like 15 minutes to download one image. I was about to make the argument that I looked at it way too young when I shouldn't have, when it was illegal, and my parents, of course, did not allow it, and I turned out okay. But now I just realized I proved their point. You'll turn out like me if you look. Anyway, bad joke. I want to move completely to another direction. Apple's got this attack ad running on Google Chrome.
Yeah, it is. And so Apple has released a new video that essentially, illustrates the security challenges of using Chrome versus its Safari browser. And they're making kind of 2 points. On the one hand, is that incognito mode is really not incognito at all. There's a private mode, but unbeknownst to the user, you turn it on, you think that you're protected from Google snooping on your web browsing activities, but in reality, there's a $5 billion class action lawsuit that suggests otherwise, and Google, in fact, has admitted that a private mode wasn't fully private, and that also Chrome uses cookies to track your activities. And despite the fact that the company has announced that they will be phasing them out sometime next year, they're still aggressively using cookies to track your activities and sharing that information with third parties, because in the settings, everything is set by default to on. Whereas with Safari, the default is off. The browser does not behave in that way. And in fact, there are more controls to ensuring that your private data doesn't go beyond the site that you're actually dealing with. And even then, you have fairly granular controls to stop that from happening. So Apple released that, frankly, it's a pretty, amusing, but also eye-opening and jarring video that illustrates the security differences between Safari and Chrome. And part of it is marketing ease, but also part of it is reality. Most of us aren't aware of just how much data we're sharing when we do engage in a browsing session, and choice of browser and how you set up that browser. Those are part of the exercise that we need to go through in order to take control of our data so that we control who sees it and under what circumstances. I think I have to laud Apple for bringing this to the fore. And quite frankly, we could all do well with a little bit of a browser tune-up. And maybe this is the excuse that we need to make that happen.
What is Google responding to this attack ad? What are they saying in defense of Chrome?
Google is saying that they are they still want users to have control over their experience. They don't deny Apple's allegations. They don't respond directly to them, but they're saying that they want users to be in control, and they decide what they can access, who they share it with, and in what context, which almost feels like, if you read between the lines, their way of saying, yeah, we know that we're oversharing, but that's kind of on you. It's not on us, which to me is somewhat disingenuous, considering how little the average end user understands about this. And Google is essentially using personal data to fuel its growth. And so I think there's a lot of money at stake. The default browser on your device, Google, of course, has, I think, 30% of iPhones, the default browser is Chrome. The higher that percentage goes, the more money Google makes. So there's this titanic battle. Apple wants some of that revenue back, doesn't just want to give it away to Google. If you control the gate, you control the revenue that goes through that gate. And so this is a multi-billion-dollar battle. I would expect the videos to be flying back and forth in the months to come. And I'll make some popcorn and pull up a chair. I think we all should.
Carmi Levy is a technology expert based out of London, Ontario, Canada. And this was time for Technology Time. Carmi, thanks so much for talking to me. Appreciate it.
So great being with you, David. Thanks so much.
In just a few moments, it's foreign correspondent Tony 5 to go over the most important headline from the weekend, the Biden dropout. But before that, Tony's got a question. What's the worst odor you've ever smelt? I'm looking forward to this conversation. And yes, it'll involve fishy smells. Well, the man of the hour, day, minute, century, week is here.
Are we talking stamina, or are we talking just geographic location, David?
Unclear. We're talking, that I know.
Oh, David, what a weekend. Old Joe's for the blow.
I haven't said your name yet. I got to say your name. I got to introduce you. There's certain things we have to do as part of the format.
Do people not know me already? I mean, the 4 or 5 listeners obviously know it's me from my... I'm obviously not... What's his name? Richard Crick or whatever his name is. What's his name? Your mate that's always there? The clever guy?
What? Richard Crick?
What's his name? I forget his name. Who's the other guy?
Dan Riskin.
There you go. Richard Crick, Dan Riskin. Same difference. Oh, my friend Dan. We discussed this earlier. Oh, always something novel. And then with me and you, anal fissures. Ridiculous. Okay, introduce me now, David. Introduce me.
All right, it's Tony 5. He's in England, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're introduced. What did you want to say before we get into some of the most important news in America this century?
I was going to ask what your worst smell was. What's the worst smell you've ever had?
This woman I dated.
Seriously, was it that bad?
She had an ailment. It wasn't even like she didn't bathe. She bathed all the time. She just had this ailment. It's called fish odor syndrome. It's a real thing, and it's really sad.
Oh, man.
It's called trimethylaminuria.
Oh, my God.
Fish odor syndrome. And your body and your stomach doesn't digest a certain enzyme.
Oh, down below, you mean? Was it down below?
It was everywhere.
Oh, dude.
And if she touched my hand, the oils would be on my hand.
And then you'd smell like fish.
Yeah. And then I would get this phantom smell. And now whenever I'm in public and someone has this disorder, I immediately think of her. And the sad part about it is she was wonderful. She's one of the best people I ever dated. She did get married.
To a fish?
No, to a man.
Oh.
To a man.
Oh, right.
There are people that have no sense of smell, so I'm really hoping her husband has no sense of smell.
Anosmia. Yeah, I've heard of that. Anosmia. You can't smell anything. Was she lovely? Was she pretty as well?
She was pretty. She was lovely. Good attitude. Great. When we finally broke up, I just stopped texting her and she stopped texting me. And then a few months later, I checked in on her and she's like, "Hey, how you doing? Let's have a phone call." She was so nice. And then I just my friend described her as someone who really knows how to off, and I thought that was a really good compliment.
That's a great, because she just left it, but not nastily, just left it.
No,
but that is you've taken this to a whole new dimension. I thought you were gonna say a rotting vegetable, but a person that you dated. How does she cope with life then? I mean, did you address it? Did you openly speak about the smelliness?
I didn't have the heart, And it's just sad. But back to how it happens, your body can't digest a certain enzyme, and so you excrete it through your skin, in the oils in your skin. It's a really sad thing. And it's an ailment that people have, and it must really, you got to get a job outdoors.
Yeah, it's one of those ailments that is not as severe as cancer or diabetes or AIDS, but has a debilitating thing, isn't it? It's you will never get a telethon or a charity for it.
These people, I feel terrible for them. And whenever I smell one in public, on the subway, I smelled someone who had this, and it's the exact same odor. And it's
serious.
It's a punch in the face, but I kind of have a positive association with it because she was such a wonderful person. We didn't match. We weren't a great match. I don't think it would have worked out even if she didn't have the ailment. But I tried to make it work, and it was really tough in the bedroom, dude. It was really tough. I had to breathe through my mouth.
Oh, man, that's so... You know what? You've come across out of this really sweet, that you went out with a smelly humdinger, and you kind of... do you know what? That is. I've got a newfound respect for you that you went out with a smelly smellicin. Wow.
She was so great. I was like, what are you doing with me? You're a lovely person, well-adjusted, like a great catch, laid back, easygoing, sweet, good-looking. I feel terrible for her, and I just hope her husband, who seems like a nice guy, can't smell.
Could you find her and then send me a picture of her later on, just off radio topic? Because I would love to see her, and whether that smell come through in the photo, I would love to know.
I guess we'll find out. I don't want to give her any more information than that, just for her own privacy, because I feel bad. No. Should I have said something? We went out maybe 5 to 10 times. We slept together maybe half of that, 2 to 4 times. It was not as...
You met her on the internet?
No, I met her at a party, and then I think we matched again on the internet, honestly.
But in the party, wasn't it dancing? Wasn't sweat combined with the fish odor just overwhelming for everybody?
I used to drink and do a lot of substances, so
And so drinking the substances stopped your sense of smell?
It didn't hit me until the first date. And then I'm like, am I crazy? Because I was just catching whiffs of it. Look, I feel bad even talking about this.
Well, no, I'm not being nasty about her. I'm for curious, that's all. But yeah, okay, wow.
We're going to get to Biden dropping out of the election, I promise you, listener. And
is that what's happened?
It is. And earlier in the show, you said our 4 or 5 listeners. We are definitely not up to 4 or 5, Tony.
Okay, sorry.
But I do apologize to our one listener. But anyway, it's a terrible affliction. It's awful.
It is, but it's a weird. It's if there is a God and God is around, that is God just taking the piss, isn't it? Do you not think that is God just going, well, we've done the old cancers, let's make somebody smell like fish?
It is sad, but it does seem like a practical joke.
It does. That genuinely seems like a practical joke, but okay. All right. Yeah, fair enough.
Trimethylaminuria.
Well, what's the actual name you called it? Fish body.
It's called fish odor syndrome. Trimethylaminuria. TMAU for short. It's
I could just imagine. I mean, what can you do? I suppose you can have a digestive medication that might adjust the enzymes. I suppose you could have a really severe bath wash or maybe a deodorant that masks it. But if it comes out your pores, there's nothing you can do, right?
Yeah, they're saying avoid certain foods that could produce this chemical that your body doesn't.
I think you could say avoid certain people and places.
Well, that too. Well, I'm saying you like outdoor job, like a soccer outdoor where you're running around, get a lot of airflow. Maybe work on an airfield. You know those dudes and women who guide planes with the.
Yeah, but just not on an airplane.
Yeah, no. You wouldn't want to be a flight attendant. Or a pilot, if you your co-pilot would be trapped in there with you.
Or can you imagine a train cabin or one of those crane operators where you're stuck in like a 5x5x5 meter cubicle? Oh,
well,
beautiful.
Crane operator's fine because you're in there alone.
Oh yeah, I suppose so. But then you'd have to. Okay, question: does she smell herself?
I don't know. I didn't have a conversation with her, and I think I could make fun of this if the only person I knew who had it or that wasn't lovely, or I didn't know anyone who had it, I would be much more mean about this. But knowing someone and like understanding what they must have to go through at every job, at every classroom.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It's really debilitating, David.
It's sad because like everyone's going to have this awful impression of you and there's nothing you can do. You could bathe every day and I think it would help a bit. And I'm sure she did bathe every day, but still, it's wild. Yeah.
I mean, all I'm thinking of now, how her high school was and her kindergarten and her lower school. It must have been horrific for her.
She seems really well adjusted. Maybe she just accepted that if people were going to judge her for this early on, they weren't worth her time. You know what I mean? Like anyone who's going to be mean to you and tease you about that is not a great person. And so maybe she's really good at filtering that out. And maybe she had nice parents. Like, I don't know anything about her. And it was like 10 years ago or more. It was a long time ago. But still, yeah.
I know you say I've got a lot of empathy. And obviously I'm being funny on air, but I realised if I'd have met a girl like that and I would spray myself with fart spray just to take the edge off her and take it on me. Like, because I would do that for someone. Just, if she was that nice a person, I would do that. I would smear, I don't know, turds on my back end just so that people would, not think it was me rather than her.
Can we talk about fart spray or liquid ass, as it's called? It's a small aerosol can. And it's a chemical made by chemical companies that make fake smells and fake tastes and all this. It's a
joke product, isn't it? Do you not have it in there in America?
I was thinking is it considered? I was thinking about this the other day. Like if I sprayed it on someone, or I was in a confined space and I sprayed it in like an art gallery or a store, or someone's place of business or someone's home, is that a crime? And if so, what is the crime?
Skunk spray, because there is it's not like a CS gas or I don't know what you call it out there. Do you have pepper spray?
Yeah.
Right, so there is a skunk venom that you can spray that is like pungent to the eyes and the smell, it really overloads you. I don't know what it's called, but if you spray it at a person, it's in the UK anyway, it's considered ABH, actual bodily harm, because it can make your eyes and all that water. Not GBH, not grievous. But I don't know what it's like in the States. So you can spray someone. I don't think spraying environmentally. I mean, if I sprayed it in your toilet, it wouldn't really do anything like fart spray. But kids get it. Kids get it in like joke shops called fart spray or whatever. But you can get really, really, really like make your eyes water. It sticks in your nose and stuff. I would spray that all over myself as deodorant and just go out with her. Because surely when you've gone into a place, there are people around that are kind of their noses, like that bewitched lady, the noses move, the eyes water, or they're looking around. That's the worst thing, when they're looking around wondering who's that smelling.
It's like in that crappy movie with Adam Sandler, Billy Madison, when he's around all the kids and then the one kid pees in his pants. Yes. And so Adam Sandler's character, to make all the other kids not make fun of him, also pees in his pants. Or it's like when your friend has cancer and you're all raising money, you all shave your heads.
Yeah. We should all, David, I want to dedicate this show, David. I'm going to be serious now. To all those sufferers out there who suffer from fish body syndrome.
Trimethylaminuria. Yeah, TMUA.
Yeah, this is going well, I think, is the podcast for you. We support you. We believe in you. Hashtag smelly fish body.
Hashtag smelly fish body. Yeah, that's about it.
If you or anyone you know suffers from this condition, please forward them our podcast details and we will provide a supportive helpline, solace, a nasal-free area for them.
We're here at Tony 5, and when we come back, we will talk the American election. President Joe Biden will not be running again, and I think it's because Tony and I talked about it last week. I suggested he should step down, so you're welcome, anyone who wanted him to step down. We are the ones who tipped the scale. We'll be back with Tony 5.
That was such content from one question.
We are here with foreign correspondent Tony 5. He is our most political correspondent of all the foreign correspondents of this show. Also the only one. Tony, welcome back.
Oh, yes, David. So based on our last conversation, we suggested Joe Biden pull out of the race, or pull out of anything, really, to be fair. And wham, alakazam, David, he did. Now, I think there's a direct correlation between the fact that me and you spoke of it, and then a few days later, he left. Now, I'm not saying that we have a lot of political influence.
But?
No buts. I'm saying that we don't have a lot of political influence.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Full stop. I agree, but you never know. I mean, like, what is it? The butterfly effect? A butterfly flaps its wings in Papua New Guinea and it changes weather and whatever. Doesn't matter.
Did he eat a butterfly? What? I don't actually know what happened. What did he do?
I think he just didn't have a great debate performance, and he now has COVID, and he's just reflecting on his own ability, age, what other people are saying, what the polls are saying, what his peers are saying, and he selflessly decided to put what he thinks is best for the country first, then his own. I mean, what better display to show that you and your party are different than Donald Trump than to listen to those who are saying you can't do this, you shouldn't do this. You know what I mean? Like, Donald Trump is only looking out for numero uno. He would never step down.
Who is that? Is that his girlfriend, numero uno? I can't remember. She's tall and blonde.
It is. Yeah, that's his seventh wife.
Okay. Foreign, isn't it? Italian, numero uno. But, I mean, he is putting himself first. I think he left it a little bit too late to be that magnanimous. Had he done it when he first made his flump, I hope people see it from your perspective and say, okay, this guy has said, do you know what? I'm listening to all the pointers. I'm listening to the former presidents. I'm listening to friends, family, doctors, and I'm going to pull out, and hopefully, but I'm hoping it's not too late. Maybe it's not, but I don't know who's going to be, running next.
So I humbly disagree with you that it's too late.
Okay.
The Republicans just had what's called their Republican National Convention. That's when they formally nominate Trump, even though he was already going to get the nomination.
Yep.
And they have their big conference prior to the election. It's their biggest event pre-election all year.
Okay.
They are so short-sighted and so naive. They spent their whole time attacking Biden. Like, that was their spotlight. That was what the focus of their various speeches were. The election, Trump, Biden's crooked, Biden's old.
Right.
They were calling for him to step down, but I think they were bluffing. I think they genuinely thought he would not. And so they sort of created a straw man, which is do you know what a straw man is? That's when you
create... Is it a man made of straw?
Sort of.
Okay.
Imagine you have an actual argument to make with somebody, but instead
made of straw?
No, that's the actual person. And then right next to them, you make a straw man, which is a slightly modified argument that you create, and then you argue against that. It's not the real argument. So,
what kind of straw?
Hay, whatever. So their straw man was calling for Joe Biden to step down when they thought he wouldn't. So their gamble was they make him look terrible. They highlight the ways in which he did bad in that debate, the ways in which he's old, the way in which Trump is coming out looking superior, banking on him staying in the election.
Was this prior to the assassination attempt?
This was just after.
Just after. Okay, so they were using that. I remember he came out. See, I thought he would come out a little bit more humbler, a little quieter, a little bit more reticent, and
he did it first, but it very quickly changed.
And then it went off completely.
Yeah.
Okay,
but let me continue.
Back to Man
here.
of Steel.
So, a steel man's something else. That's when you bolster your opponent's argument. The straw man is like, suppose you basically make up what your opponent's points are, and then you argue against those points rather than who your actual opponent is and what their actual points are.
So in this case, the straw man is who? You, me, or Joe Biden? Who's the straw man?
The Republican straw man is the fact that Joe Biden is going to run.
Right.
So they're going to say that he should step down and make their whole argument about how awful he is. Instead of attacking like the party, their platform, or Kamala, who's likely to get the nomination here.
And a straw woman.
I'm stop it, okay? So they basically spend all their effort and their whole convention attacking Biden while he's just sitting around, and then he steps away and they got nothing.
Right. So now they've got no argument, basically.
This is what Trump posted to his social media network, which is called Truth Social, which is so funny for me because truth is not widely peddled on this platform.
Are you on it? Have you registered on it?
No, but it's all publicly viewable.
Okay.
Trump posted this. So we are forced to spend time and money on fighting crooked Joe Biden. He polls badly after having a terrible debate and quits the race. Now we have to start all over again. Shouldn't the Republican Party be reimbursed for fraud in that everyone around Joe, including his doctors and the fake news media, knew he was not capable of running for or being president? Just asking. With an apostrophe instead of a G on asking. They're going wild. They're like, we spent all this time and money and effort attacking our opponent, and now our opponent steps down. They're secretly mad. They wanted to run against Joe, and they thought they would be able to. But Joe stepped aside. And so it's kind of wild to me. And so they haven't really put in the effort to attack Kamala Harris. To make matters worse, Trump donated to Kamala Harris's platform when she was early on in her political career. And
beautiful.
She's also a former prosecutor now running against a convicted crook. Like, it's wild.
So you being there, do you think she has a chance? And who do you think will be the running mate?
I need a few weeks to let it all simmer. They won't choose someone until about a month from now, formally. I mean, she is the front runner, but it's so like it happened yesterday, Tony.
And it's not so because she's so you got to explain it to me. Because she's vice president, she doesn't automatically become the representative. Only if he steps down. So technically, he is still president, even though he's not
stepping
running.
down. He's just electing not to run again. Maybe elect is the wrong word. He's choosing not to run again.
So do you think he might step down now as a president?
No, he specifically said, "I want to focus on finishing my term." His term doesn't end until January.
Yeah. I mean, it's always around my birthday, which is always suspicious. But yeah. Oh wow, that's amazing. So Kamala Harris. So there are some people I've read various reports. Some people say she's a bit harsh. Some people say she's not very press savvy. Does that make us members of the fake news? Are we fake news, David?
I think according to Trump, everyone he doesn't like or anyone who's critical of him is fake news. So I guess we are fake news. I must add that
to my Tinder profile. Fake news. Okay. All right. Anyway, so wow, this is amazing. So what's the vibe like in America? What's the feelings and stuff? Because here it's quite, even though we have just gone through a whole tumultuous time with our political system, it has become enjoyably boring, which is what I heard somebody say on the radio, which was a beautiful statement. There's no stress, there's no drama, there's nothing going on. It is just enjoyably boring. We're in a place where the water's just calm, the new government's come in, he's not making too many waves, he's just doing his thing. Everybody knows if you come out and attack him now, most people would realize that's just bullying because there's nothing he could have done, and he's inherited this 14 years of abject chaos. So what's it like in the States at the moment?
Well, I don't see these people on the right, these Republicans, no matter who they lose to, if they lose, being enjoyably boring. But maybe there is a candidate out there who would be more palatable to them, who would sort of, even though they lost to someone who they don't hate as much, and they just calm down. I mean, I wish that would be what happens here, but I do worry no matter what happens, Trump and Vance are going to reject the election results if they lose, which will cause the same sort of chaos again, it did 4 years ago. That's my worry, but I'm hopeful. You know, there have been times in the United States history where the country has been less than ideal and they've recovered from it. So who knows? I mean, I think it'll be a big scramble for the Democrats to get their ticket together, which is the American idiomatic way of saying who's going to be on the ballot for president and vice president. I think it's most likely to be Harris, but, you know, you never know. You never know.
I mean, what I find sad is during that insurrection a couple of years ago, people died, and I've never seen it publicly broadcast who died. In this latest assassination attempt, I think people were hurt and one person died. Again, I haven't really seen the public. It's not been, if I search for it, I'm pretty sure I'd find it, but it's not been very sort of public driven. I've not seen it on any of the news anchors or anything like that. I do like a guy called something Buttigieg. Buttigieg, right? Only because of his name, President Butt. Brilliant, absolutely phenomenal.
And he's gay, so I feel like there's a nice
and he's openly gay, so he'd be the first openly gay president with his name Butt. Which I quite like. I would vote for him. So I officially, Tony Five from London, am behind Butt.
That'd be a good ticket, Harris and Buttigieg. I want to see Harris and Jon Stewart, although he has no plans on running and has never been a politician. But I don't know. I think he's a great, we've talked about this. My brother's husband, who's gay, but his last name is not Butt, wants to see Oprah and Deepak Chopra on the ticket for the Oprah Chopra ticket. I'm not a big fan of that ticket. I don't know. I think we'll just have to wait and see. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I need a week or two to form an opinion on who I think is going to run and who I think is going to be next. I think everyone's kind of shocked because up until the very last minute, Biden was like, I'm running. I'm running. You know, I owe it to the people who nominated me to run and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, you know, a nomination isn't the same as an election, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's run like an election, but you're not bound by anything other than like your party's internal rules. You're not, you know what I mean? It's not like you've run for office and then you step down. Things can swap out at the last minute and it's okay. So I don't know that he owed those delegates him remaining in the race. Plus, what were their options on the ticket? It's like, so.
No, exactly. Is it fantastical to think that Michelle Obama could run? Is that fantasy or is that possible?
I suppose it's possible, but I would say at this juncture, very unlikely. We're here with Tony Five. When we come back, we are going to talk something that happens in the UK, and I guess a little bit in the US and Canada too, accent discrimination. Have you ever been discriminated against for your discriminate? That's a hard word to say. Discriminated? Discriminated. Did I do it right?
Oh, yes, David. It is me. And I have been discriminated against for this first accent.
Tony's going to get us canceled. We'll be back with more of him in a moment. Accent discrimination. Doing a complete 180 from where we were with Joe Biden. Tony Five is here, our foreign correspondent. He is from England. Tony, what part of England were you raised in?
So I was born in London, the actual city of London.
Sorry, I meant to say what part of London were you raised in?
North London. So I've got what would people be called a North London accent. Not Cockney. Cockney is specifically an East London dialect. So it's very much, all right, mate, all right, Cockney guy, all right, geezer. And it's very much 60s, 70s era London. And they say people, there's a anecdote saying people that are born within the sound of the Bow Bell, so it's the bell tower from a church in London called Bow Church, have the Cockney accent and they can class themselves as a Cockney. I'm a North Londoner. South Londoners speak slightly different. East and West Londoners, West London is considered the more posh end. So you've got like your very exclusive sides and very expensive sides. East London, I wouldn't say poorer or different social demographic, but again, a little bit more common, as it were. But the reason I bring it up, there's been a big radio host who is a radio presenter, very good radio presenter, but grew up with a very strong Birmingham, Brummie accent.
Birmingham.
And I guess, I don't know what the version would be in America. Would that be like a Deep South or an Arkansas? Something where an accent immediately makes them think of their intelligence or what they're like, even though it has nothing to do with that. You can get PhDs who have got the Southern accent. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I think in Canada, like a rural accent, you could have someone who's like the most intelligent postdoctoral researcher in the field of research, which is my favorite field, and yet people will discriminate against them for their accent. I'd like to say it happens less in Canada.
Okay.
But it does happen. But yes, it can very much happen in the United States, but nothing on the order of England. And I want to talk about that in a minute. But so what happened with this presenter?
So this presenter, he had an interview with The Guardian, a big newspaper here in the UK. And he said when he was young, he knew that his accent would hold him back. And he doesn't say how, maybe his parents influenced him or something. So he willfully changed it to kind of a posh English accent. And he's a fantastic radio host. He's interviewed prime ministers and so on. But he regrets it. He thinks that he sold himself out, that he would have loved to have kept his Brummie accent like his family, his friends. But then on the flip side, he said that he wouldn't be where he was now had he had that. So it sort of opened up discussion about the obvious discriminations that people experience, colour, creed, religion, so on. But now there's this thought that actually, you can be discriminated against how your voice sounds, which is fascinating because obviously me and you, no one knows what we look like or we sound like and etc. And it's just what they hear of us. And I thought, I wonder whether people do that, like subconsciously.
Like, for example, you're not even really black, which is just a little joke we have.
No, I'm actually a female Irish woman.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I feel like even saying that, I'm going to get canceled. You are black.
Correct.
I feel like I have to make that clear when you do your offensive Nigerian impressions. It's funny to me that it's not really in the Brits' radar.
No.
That you're doing it. So much so that some radio presenter comes out and says, hey, this happened to me if I didn't have my if I didn't train myself to have a posh accent and I kept my Birmingham accent, I would have been discriminated against. I wouldn't have had this job. I wouldn't get to interview prime ministers and whatnot. It's funny to me that it takes someone like that to say it, to be part of your national conversation, because for whatever reason, to me, it's always been obvious. And I want to bring that show, because we've talked about this before, but that horrific, amazing, awful, bizarre show, Naked Attraction, where
that's your default, isn't it? You love going back to that.
I love the show. For people who don't know, it's a dating show where they reveal the naked bodies of the contestants, and then the person who wants to go on the date with them picks them based on what they look like naked, and then the person who's doing the picking also gets naked. It's just ridiculous. But the first thing that many contestants say who are choosing, the host will be like, what kind of accent do you like? And they'll be like, oh, I don't like a northern accent. I don't like and I'm like, do you realize what you're saying is, okay, people from this part of the country are thought to be poorer and lower class and not lords and not the kinds of people that would interview prime ministers. And you're just outright saying you don't like them. And it's so normalized. Like, I don't think it even goes through people's heads when they say, oh, I could never date someone with a northern accent. And yet I'm watching this and I'm like, you're saying the quiet part out loud. You would never say I would never date a black person.
Correct. Or you'd never say I would date a short person. You couldn't come on and go, do you know what? I can't stand short people. Because obviously that would be so, everybody would go, but when you say, correct, you're saying I don't like someone from this social demographic. I think they're poor or beneath me. I don't. So you're right. It goes through every day. And it's like you said, it's on this show and it has been on this show. They'll say, oh, I don't like the Brummie accent. And they laugh and they joke about it, which is probably the way it was maybe in the 60s and 70s when you'd get white people on TV saying, oh, I don't like the blacks, or I don't like the browns, or I don't like the whatevers. And I guess that just hasn't caught up, right?
Yeah. It's wild. And then it'll be contestants on the show where one of the last stages of dating after you've eliminated some of the naked people, they'll do one round, I think when there's 3 naked people left or maybe 4, and they'll talk. They'll just say something like, my name is Bobby and I'm a
personal trainer or something.
Or I'm a bricklayer, or my favorite part of my body is my abs. They'll say one little fact about themselves, and these people picking the naked people will be totally into them. They'll talk about how they like their body, they like their genitals, they like their boobs, they like their hair, whatever. And then the second they open their mouths, they're like, ugh, Scottish, no. Or like, ugh, from Birmingham, no. And I'm like, you would never say this if it was like, certain protected classes. But
correct. Protective attributes, yeah.
But it's so obvious that that's what it is. It's just like subtle. It's a subtle layer of class discrimination that's totally accepted and totally not really realized by the British public. And it's funny to me that it takes a nationally known presenter to say something to get the conversation going, because this stuff should be obvious, right?
Right, well, as you just said, it's an acceptable discrimination. Much like, and it sounds really silly, ginger people with red hair. There is in the UK, there is an abject ginger person discrimination. People will think they smell of urine. I don't know why. I've never met anybody who smells of urine. Or they're somehow inferior or inbred. Whereas there's no scientific basis on any of that. Yet it's just it's a school ground bullying. Do you know, like, it's school ground bullying that somehow transitioned itself to adult life. And I find it completely crazy.
It's so funny to me because Anne of Green Gables, orange hair, freckles, all grown up, like adults, like in her 30s. Like, that's my dream woman.
I know. You love that.
I have what's called gingivitis.
Yeah.
I'm crazy about the orange people. They are my favorite race of people, the orange people. And so it's so funny to me that, like, gingers get discriminated against in the UK, because I guess maybe they get picked on in North America because there's so few of them and it's an easy and they're all white. It's fun to pick on white people, but it's not like institutionalized. What do they call it? Redism or gingerism?
Gingerism, redhead, strawberry blonde, and there was a time where, like, they tried to rebrand. Ginger people tried to rebrand themselves, which was amazing. Rather than calling themselves ginger, they'd say they were Auburn, or they'd say they were strawberry blondes, which was fantastic. Whoever did their PR for that, phenomenal. Didn't work out. They didn't do the. They didn't keep it going, basically.
Yeah, I dig ginger chicks.
I know you do, man. Gingivitis, man. You got it. You've got the ginger fever, David.
It's a problem. I mean, I like other people too.
Races.
I mean, is it weird to say I like black women? Is that a weird thing to say?
Weirdly, if I had ginger hair, I'd look like a Duracell battery.
I feel like me saying I like black women hits the ear a little weirder than you saying you like white women.
Yeah, that's another thing. Why is that? I mean, I like women of all sorts, to be fair.
I feel like you mostly date white women, though, don't you?
I do mostly date white women, only because you can see both of us when we go out at night. But to be fair, it's kind of, I like your typical blondes. I've gone out with a few redheads. I don't know how much of they say redheads are fiery. All these terminologies, blondes being a bit bimbo-y, black hairs being a bit stable, and gingers being a bit, like, fiery. I don't think I've ever seen that trope. But I think nationality-wise, I've been out with Italians who are fiery. I've been out with
Italians are busy screaming, pizza pasta.
And the hands, they're going in, and you're a straw man. What's a straw man? You're silly man. So like things like that. I get that. That's kind of true. That's a positive discrimination, because they are like that. They're lunatics.
I mean, there's a scene in Seinfeld where Jerry thinks he's dating a Chinese woman because her name is something Chang, Donna Chang.
Yeah.
She ends up not being Chinese. It's just she just has a last name that sounds Chinese. And Jerry's saying, I'm really into Chinese women. And Elaine says, isn't that a bit racist? And Jerry says, is it racist if I like their race? And I was just watching it the other day. I'm like, that would not fly in 2024. I mean, it's not like that bad, but it's just today's cultural norms.
Where's the offense? Where's the offense? That he liked a race? What was the offense there? I missed that completely.
I don't know. It feels a little off. Isolating a group of people for their ethnicity and then saying I put them up on a pedestal dating wise. But in the same vein, like, can't you have your preferences? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I know guys that prefer overweight women. I know guys that prefer very underweight women. I know guys that prefer all sorts of women. And there's obviously an associated name, usually quite offensive to each one, like chubby chasers, we call them in the UK. Where
women who like Jews are called bagel chasers. You ever heard that?
Really?
Yeah, you've never heard that one?
No, we don't have that in the UK, because Jews genuinely go out with each other in the UK. There's nowhere, like, if you told me now, where would I go out to meet a Jewish woman? I wouldn't even know, because I wouldn't go to a synagogue, because there would be like the second. I don't know where I would go. Where would I find them? There's not many bagel shops.
I don't know. Fly to New York. My girlfriend Miranda's for sure a bagel chaser. She's mostly dated Jewish guys, or guys who look like they could be Jewish.
Well, do you know what? That's fascinating. What is the advantage of chasing a Jewish man?
It's just personal preferences. We got dark hair. I don't know. We're just a type. It's a type, Tony. That's all.
But I don't see it like I know you keep telling me you look Jewish. Could you look any different?
It's because all white people look the same to you, Tony.
Yeah, but you said dark hair, glasses, I mean, I don't know whether you sound Jewish.
I do. There's a certain accent, and I definitely have it. Tony, that's all the time we have for.
Oh, man.
That's all the time we have for.
Did we get to the bottom of the straw thing?
No.
Am I the straw man or you the straw man?
I didn't explain that very well last segment, okay? We're all the straw men.
We're all straw men. All women.
Tony Five, our foreign correspondent. Tony, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time.
David, it's been epic. And to all the straw people out there and people that smell like fish, much love.
In a few moments' time, super synchronizers. Those are people whose heartbeat matches with others. Their blinking matches, their talking matches, their eyesight matches, synchronizing. People who do this are considered to be more sexy and more attractive. It's a relatively new area of investigation in psychology, and we'll talk to a professor who's doing just that. So you got that to look forward to. Do you feel synchronized with me in the show? Because we feel synchronized with you. We're going to talk about a concept in romance and dating and psychology called super synchronizers. It sounds dramatic, and we are going to jump in with Dr. Shir Atzil at the Department of Psychology at the Hebrew University. Shir, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Start, if you may, by explaining what super synchronizers are, because I know my introduction wasn't that deep, and how you identify them.
Okay, so what we discovered in the lab is that some people just have the capacity to synchronize better, regardless of the task or regardless of the partner that they're interacting with. And we know that synchrony is a well-studied and well-established phenomena. It turns out that when people interact, they synchronize. They synchronize their physiology, like their heart rate or their hormones level. They synchronize their brain responses. They synchronize their behavior, their motor movements. And a lot of research demonstrated that synchrony is a good thing. It's a social thing. People who synchronize better have more close relationships. For example, when mothers and infants synchronize well, it is a very good predictor of child development, of maternal health, of well-being of both of them. And when you let two people synchronize in the lab while collaborating on a game or something, they would feel more together afterwards. There's also research on synchrony in couples, actually, in married couples, where synchrony is related to marital satisfaction, even to sexual attraction. So synchrony is a good thing. But what we were interested in is whether this mechanism can actually be a feature of mate selection. Because mate selection is often studied in non-human animals, where static features like how big is the animal or how colorful are his feathers.
Okay.
But in humans, obviously, there's more complicated dynamic processes that go on. And we wanted to see whether this synchrony, this phenomena, is actually related to attraction, to mate selection, to us selecting or being attracted to specific individuals and not others. And we tested that in the lab. We tested whether if we bring people to the lab and let them date several people in like a speed dating round robin kind of setup, will they be mostly attracted to the people who synchronize better with them? That was the research question. And we did that. We brought people to the lab. We had them date with each other, and we could quantify very accurately the level of synchronization between them. We were interested in physiological synchrony. And we tested the physiological synchrony between men and women. And each date had a different synchrony level. So some dates were really synchronized and some dates not so much. And you can see that some people, no matter who you put together with them in the date, they can better synchronize. They're really good in synchrony. And what we wanted to see is whether this is specific, whether this is a social phenomenon. So we also let them do another synchrony task, like a very simple, non-social sensory motor synchrony task, where they need to synchronize their finger taps to a metronome beat. And so we see that people who are good synchronizers in dates are also good synchronizers just by tapping to a metronome beat.
Could this be why musicians are often held as more desirable mates stereotypically?
Yes, absolutely. Musicians and dancers, yes, I definitely think yes. And we think that the ability, I think that the magic feature here is being able to sense what's going on in the outer world and adapt yourself to it. People who are good in that, people who are very sensitive to external cues in their environment, whether it's music or it's a metronome beat or it's another human being, and they are able to predict their partner, to predict what's going to happen, and to adapt themselves to this. This is a very it's a very cool feature because it lets you be attuned to your environment, whether the environment is social or whether it's not social. And we also think that it makes sense in an evolutionary way because because of a phenomena that we know that our physiology is better regulated when we are together with partners who synchronize us. And this can be the key here. This can be, so if my heart rate goes up because I'm stressed and a partner that sits in front of me is able to sense that. It's not that easy to sense, but if my partner can sense that and can adapt their behavior to accommodate it, then I would feel an immediate relief or an immediate sense of reward, reinforcement to this interactive part. And we think that this is perhaps the reason why people, when they're having a synchronized date, they go out from the date and they want to see that person again.
Takeaways. If I want to be better at dating, am I doomed to only be as good at dating as I am at synchronizing? Or are there things that I can do to make my ability to synchronize with others greater?
So first of all, that's a great question that needs to be empirically tested. But I think, from what I know about the brain is very plastic. So we're able to learn very sophisticated learning in social interactions and in general. And I think that once we discover this mechanism, once we discover that being a good partner in an interaction by synchronizing yourself to your partner makes you more attractive, I think this could be a first step in maybe trying to improve that, maybe trying to be better at that, being mindful to that. And so I definitely think that, first of all, it's easier for us to synchronize with some partners than others. So first of all, a good tip would be to find your partner that is easier for you to synchronize with. And second of all, I'm very optimistic about the possibility of improving there, just like musicians can improve.
Is there any understanding behind the method by which organisms, animals synchronize, or is how that happens not well understood?
So another great question, because it's a latent process, right? Our physiology, what we measure, like the level of our heart rate, it's not something that is easily tracked on a human. It's not easily seen. And it's really interesting to try to figure out what are the behavioral cues or what are the cues that we see in the partner that change when their heart rate goes up, for example. How can we detect that? And we can detect it. We see that people can detect it, but not specifically in an explicit way. So people are able to adapt themselves, but they don't know to say what they were adapting to. And so this is another thing that we can quantify in the lab. When we do dates in the lab, we can try to quantify the behavioral cues, the changes in this medium between two people when they interact. What happens that signifies these changes in physiology, that signifies such needs in physiological regulation, that if we are attuned to, we can better interact. And so we're trying to look for specific behaviors. So other studies have done that too and found some features like eye gaze, like body movement, And these are all important. And we also have other features of physiology that are evident, like the color of our skin, how flush we are, how much we move our leg if we're nervous or what, how close we tend to be to the partner, and so on. And so I think all of these behavioral cues are cues that we are, as social experts, learned early on in our life to recognize as meaningful behavioral cues. And I think we use them in order to synchronize our physiology to the partner. But these are still empirical questions that we're trying to answer.
It's really interesting. And to rewind a bit, nothing sounds more romantic than a date in a lab. My last question for you, what are the next steps in your research on synchrony, on it playing a role in partners' attractiveness to each other? What do you hope to investigate next?
So we're trying to understand the physiological gains, the actual adaptive features of synchrony. Why is synchrony so good? Why does synchrony feel so good? Do we have an immediate or very robust physiological gain from synchronizing with someone else? We also want to characterize these super synchronizers. Who are they? What are their brain function and anatomy is? How are they different from others? And of course, what you asked before, can we train people to become super synchronizers? Can we improve people's synchrony in order to help them find a partner, be more social? Can we use that to help people who are having trouble in interacting with others? I think all of these are interesting research paths that we're now working on.
Shir, thanks for your time. I appreciate you going into this with me.
Thank you very much, David.
Dr. Shir Atzil is at the Department of Psychology at the Hebrew University. Here's what's coming up next. Look, I've never been a fan of NASCAR. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I don't really get it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to interview someone who races cars and someone who's an expert in NASCAR in a little segment I call 10 Questions About NASCAR from an Idiot Who Knows Nothing About NASCAR. I'm the idiot in this case. Will my next guest convince me? You'll have to stick around and find out because you won't believe what happens next. Oh man, does that sound like clickbait or what? We're here to talk cars on a segment I call 10 Questions About NASCAR from an Idiot, that's me, who knows nothing about NASCAR. We're here with Dave Bradley. He's a news manager and morning news anchor at 640 Toronto, and he is a part-time car racer, full-time dad. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So NASCAR, I live in the United States. I feel like I should know something about it, but I've decidedly ignored it because it just seems like to me like loud and boring, and I'm sure you have a different opinion. So what exactly is NASCAR for an idiot who knows nothing about it? All I know is that there's a racetrack and there's cars. That's question one.
It's go fast, turn left. That's what it is, right? From people on the outside looking in, they're like, how hard could that be? All you have to do is turn left. That's, you're driving a car. I can drive for 500 miles. It's not a big deal, but there is so much strategy involved and surprisingly physical fitness. It's difficult to be in those cars. They're hot inside. And the cars want to do anything but what you want it to do. So they'll try and spin out on their own. They'll try and push through the corner without turning. So it's difficult to sort of keep control and maintain that control for, 3 hours and the distance of the race. So I like the strategy aspect of it and just the raw speed and I find there's a lot of stuff that goes on underneath the cars, setup wise, sort of technological advancements, little things that happen that are really fascinating to me.
Okay, so what are the basic rules? Is it just who finishes first? Is it really that simple?
It is that simple. It's you go for a qualifying period, so the fastest car qualifies up front, and then go fast for as long as you can. And there's going to be pit stops because you can't do it all on one tank of fuel. So you might have 2, 3, 4 pit stops over the course of the race and complete those pit stops as quickly as possible. So you're not allowed to speed on pit road. That's a safety thing. But you can change tires. You're allotted a certain number of tires for the entire race distance. And go out, finish the race, and try and win.
If we're talking pit stops, isn't it just whoever can do the fastest pit stop wins? Like, I feel like there's two different things going on here, and yet they're combined into one race.
It sort of is. And that's the thing is like the pit crews now for some of these NASCAR teams are built up of collegiate athletes from the U.S. So NCAA football stars are carrying those big, heavy gas cans to fill up the gas tank on these cars because they're so big and strong and fast. And they've been doing that for all their lives. They didn't necessarily, not quite good enough to make the NFL or a pro sports franchise. So then NASCAR is like, well, why don't you come try this out? And that makes the overall pit stop faster. So yeah, if you can get through your pit stop quicker, you're going to make up time on the track at the end of the day. Ultimately, made up time on the track means you get to the checkered flag first.
You're not selling me. Like if race number 1 is the fast cars, the danger, the speed, whatever. Okay, maybe I could get into that. But isn't watching a tire get changed kind of like watching paint dry? I suppose that's question 4.
Oh yeah, but that's only seconds. Like they're in the pits for 12 seconds, 10 seconds in some cases. So that is a very, very short aspect of it. There is a lot of danger and high speed and loud noises and all of that good stuff that goes hand in hand with NASCAR. I mean, some people are in it and they watch just for the crashes, and the crashes are spectacular in a lot of cases. But for me, I love the close racing, side by side, sometimes cars banging off each other, cars sliding through the corner so they get crossways, and the drivers fighting to maintain control. I love all that aspect of it.
So what kind of people get into racing in NASCAR? Because the barrier to entry is so high. Like, I can't just buy one of these cars. For example, if I want to get into tennis, I buy a racket. That's a couple $100. If it's used, it's even less. Like, how do I get into NASCAR if I want to start racing?
Well, there's racing all over. Here in my area, there's 3 or 4 local racetracks that are a lot smaller than the ones that NASCAR would race on. But you can start, if you have an old Pontiac Sunfire, you gut out all the interior, you put a roll bar in, and essentially you go racing. And that's one of your entry level places that you can get into stock car racing. And then you start moving up through the classes, build speed. The cars cost a lot more. And then you're right. Entry level to NASCAR is huge. I mean, the barrier there is essentially money, and you need to come with a lot of it in order to get into NASCAR. But to gain experience in some of these local circles, they're sanctioned by NASCAR, so you can be theoretically a NASCAR driver here in Canada. Canada has its own NASCAR series, as a matter of fact. So it's the NASCAR Canada series, which I've done play-by-play for almost 20 years. So we have stars here that go on to sometimes race in the US. And so, yeah, you can start right from the bottom end as a kid interested in mechanics. You can work on the cars yourself, and then you start climbing the ladder. And eventually, maybe if you're good enough, you can turn some heads down south and might get picked up for a ride. So
you mentioned stock cars. Is that what the SCA in NASCAR stands for?
Yeah, it's the National Association of Stock Car Auto Racing.
So what are stock cars for the purposes of this race? Which is to ask, what kind of cars do you drive in NASCAR?
Well, originally they were stock. So they were essentially street cars that were gutted and put in a roll bar and, some performance enhancements, better brakes in some cases. Now the cars you see on track are stock appearing. So you'll see Ford Mustangs and Chevrolet Camaros racing against the Toyota Camry, which on the street, not necessarily equal footing, but underneath those cars are essentially identical now. The bodies are different. The engines are a little bit different. So some make a little bit more horsepower or less, or make the horsepower in different areas. But essentially, they're just stock appearing. Underneath, they're race cars, and everything is pretty much fabricated to be a race car. But in the beginning, back in the the 50s, 60s, and probably in through the beginning of the 70s, a lot of those cars had stock body panels on them, had stock equipment underneath.
So I can't just go to a Toyota dealer and pick up one, is what you're saying?
No. And you can't, like, even a bumper for, a NASCAR Toyota Camry, you're not going to get one at a dealership. So how do these drivers get ready for these races? I hear they're incredibly fit, which to me doesn't sound like that obvious. Do they do special exercises or something? Like, what do they do to get ready? Yeah. So, I mean, in the week in between the races, so they race every week, there is a lot of working out, a lot of fitness, a lot of dietary restrictions. You want to keep your muscle up, but you want to keep your overall weight down, and just sort of A lot of cardio needs to go in there because it's difficult to maintain your physical awareness. I think during the race, awareness is a good word because you have to be aware both physically and mentally as well. So being in good shape is such a key to winning races. And it was funny to see sort of back in the day. So I would say probably 20 years ago, you would see a couple NASCAR drivers and they're sort of rotund and the suits are fitting quite snugly. And then a couple younger drivers come in and they're fit and you can tell they concentrated a lot in the gym, big arms, big, essentially a tight body. But they would get in and they would win. They would do well. And they'd hop out of the car at the end and they'd barely break a sweat, where the guy with the, little extra pounds around the waist is huffing and puffing and might not last the entire distance. So then teams started looking at the drivers and going, you need to up your physical fitness level because we're doing all we can with the car. Now it's up to you. And so the drivers have to work on themselves just like the mechanics would work on their cars. I'm
picturing Elvis in a race suit in his early days and then Elvis in his final days in a race suit. The two archetypes right there.
Exactly. 68 comeback special is what they're aiming for right now.
So can you tell me about a race that had an amazing moment, one that's unforgettable in the history of the sport, to maybe sell me on it a little bit?
In NASCAR, there's been so many. So Dale Earnhardt, I'm sure you've heard of him, the 3 that everybody has a sticker on the back of the pickup truck, and Dale Earnhardt lives forever. Sadly, he was lost in a crash at Daytona in the Daytona 500, but he had just broken through. That was sort of his last big race that he didn't win, and he finally broken through and won that race, and that was sort of a storybook finish to that race and one that was widely covered. And it was sort of a feel-good story because he was always the intimidator and he used to rattle and didn't smile a lot. But when he won, it was this weight lifted off his shoulders and it was sort of great to see everybody rallied around him. But there's been great moments, tight finishes, like thousandths of a second at the line. And that's what people go to see and that's what keeps them coming back for more.
Are there people who are only in it for the crashes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there are. A lot of people won't admit that they're in it just for the crashes, but people are there. They want to see, race cars torn up or, a guy flipping down the back stretch, which you can see, and the cars get quite airborne. But it's dangerous. I mean, yes, there's a lot of safety advancements in those race cars to keep the drivers safe, but you never know what can happen. I mean, I've seen some pretty bad crashes over the years.
Yeah, I guess ideally it's a spectacular crash, but no one is hurt.
Exactly. I mean, that's the ending that everybody wants to see. It's like, wow, did you see that? And then they walk away. So,
Dave, I really am an idiot because I totally lost track of how many questions I asked you. But let's just call it 10 questions about NASCAR from an idiot who knows nothing. I appreciate you going over the sport with me.
Hey, no problem. I love it. Anytime I get to talk race cars is a good day.
Dave Bradley is a news manager and morning news anchor at 640 Toronto. He's a part-time racer and full-time dad. That's the show. Thanks for listening to it. I'll be back tomorrow and then out until the 29th. Bada bing, bada boom.